Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race, first show of 2023. Very excited to have you because we're discussing Formula E in Mexico City E-Prix. With me, we have Edward Hunter from Formula E Zone, Joshua Birch from Joshua Birch Motorsports, link in the video description to their watch along today, and Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. Kobe, how excited are you? We're back on the air, and it's race day.
Joe, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to really miss sleeping in on Saturday mornings like I've gotten used to since the end of the 2022 season. But overall, I'm ready to go. First race of 2023, Mexico City E-Prix. Let's bring on Formula E, baby. And as a friendly reminder, we encourage our viewers to participate in the chat room and comment below. Qualifying just wrapped up. Josh and Ed were on the air over on Josh's YouTube channel covering all the action. Lucas DeGrassi, he'll be making his 101st start today in Formula E. And he got another pole position in his stellar career. He wasn't the fastest or in the top 5 in practice 1 or practice 2, though. So, Ed, starting with you, how big of a surprise was it to see DeGrassi take pole position?
Thanks, Kobe. It's great to be here again. As for Lucas DeGrassi, I think it definitely was a surprise because the Mahindra was not one of the more fancied, the ZF powertrain was not one of the more fancied packages, I think, going in. That there was a lot of question marks. The testing had gone okay, but a couple of incidents in private testing, they'd been kind of respectable, but not setting headline times at Valencia or even in free practice 1 and 2 in Mexico. And DeGrassi was able to get into the duels fairly comfortably, actually, in his group, and then survived, narrowly beat Sebastian Buemi in a very tense semi-final, and then got to the quarters and faced, of course, he faced both Andretti drivers, I believe, Lotterer first, and then Jake Dennis, and it was basically a similar thing happened in both of them, that the Andrettis kind of had issues with locking up, and sort of Jake Dennis also being sent out with a damaged front wing as well, which was very controversial. But DeGrassi kept his head, kept it together, set very, very respectable lap times, and it was enough to sneak pole position. Whether he can stay there in the race, now that's the big question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't expect DeGrassi to get pole position. He was off the pace a bit in preseason testing. He didn't look too at home in the 2 practice sessions we had, and then he just hooked it up in qualifying. I think we mentioned it, didn't we, Ed, on the air as well. He was sort of the victim of being lucky as well, because in the dual stages in the first one, he got through by the skin of his teeth against Buemi, because Buemi made a mistake, and then the other Andretti of Lotterer made a mistake, then Dennis made a mistake in the final as well. So it's a good pole position, but I don't think it reflects truly what we've got coming up in the race. He could win, but I don't think he's my pick for the win that I'll reveal later on. But it's a very interesting lineup that at the start of Gen 3, it's a new team for him as well, coming in with Mahindra. DeGrassi could be very much a one to watch. But I did put the question to you, Ed, at the end of the show. He goes well in Mexico. He loves this track. He always seems to click with it. But it's when we get to other races around the world, he doesn't seem to perform all that well.
Doesn't sound like much of a victim from the description you gave there, but okay. I'm more the beneficiary of luck than the victim, I think.
Well, it depends. Worst ways to go depends on what the luck will bring in the race, doesn't it? Really?
Guess so.
Yeah, and another surprise we saw was Jake Hughes making it to the second row and almost into the final duel to fight for the pole. He lost that to Jake Dennis after our last corner slide. Impressive weekend by Hughes and McLaren on his Formula E debut weekend. His teammate Rene Rast didn't even make it into the top 8, though. Is Jake Hughes a potential dark horse pick? And will the inexperience catch up, causing him to fall down the order throughout the race?
Hughes was someone I saw in preseason testing who was like, bang, you're going to be quick straight off. In fact, he won the shakedown event race that he did as well, the simulation. He got that with quite some dominance as well. After trading places with Rene Rast and then also with a few other drivers during the simulation. He was good in practice, very good in qualifying. I thought he was going to get through to the final. I was saying it during the session, like he was so good. He was hitting every apex perfectly. He's adapted that car fantastically. So I was a bit disappointed he lost down, but does start third on the grid because a lot of his mistakes he made. Dimas as well says, yes, I hope DeGrassi wins the 2023 Mexico E-Prix. He's won it twice before, technically 3 times, and had one taken away from him. So I think he's likely to do it, but it's a whole new era. It's very hard to pinpoint it. But my money, actually, I said I'll reveal my picker winner, would be Jake Hughes to win today. I think he's got some hunger in him as well. He's got the fresh blood as well. And remember, we've seen new guys come into this series and dominate. We saw Rosenquist do it. We saw Verline do it as well. And I've just got this feeling that Hughes could be one to shine later on today.
Yeah, well, he's certainly got a big mountain to climb, and he's done very well so far, of course. As you say, he was the reserve driver for Mercedes in previous seasons. He's someone who committed very early in the sort of a driver market at the end of 2022. He said, now I've committed completely to Formula E. I'm not waiting on another season in Formula 2. I'm going to commit completely. And I think it was interesting. There was an interview with Dan Ticktum, who also qualified quite well. And he said that Jake Hughes, I need to get 2 Jakes in line in my head, even though they're lying next to each other on the grid. He said that Jake Hughes had been unlucky in his career thus far, that he'd never really gotten any big breaks, and now McLaren had given him his big chance, of course, the unfortunately named Neil McLaren, who I talked about that sponsor already, but McLaren itself looked to be, they looked to be on top of things with Jake Hughes. Rene Rast had a bit of a messier practice session, as I think Kobe alluded to, in FP1, breaking the rear suspension by just going a little bit wide at the Peltada, clipping the wall, and giving the mechanics a bit of a job to do. But yeah, you can tell it's still the double world championship winning squad there at McLaren, because it's the same stuff from Mercedes that effectively have been hired by McLaren. The only big difference is a different livery of the car, and Zach Brown in the garage alongside the team principal. Is it Ian James? Yeah, that's his name. Yes, sorry.
Ian James,
yeah. His name. Yeah, that was a bit embarrassing. But yeah, I think Hughes has been very, very impressive so far. But the big test, it's one thing doing it in the simulations energy management, but it's quite another doing it in the low altitude in Mexico, high altitude, not low altitude, of Mexico City, of course, where you've really got to make sure your fitness is up there. You've got to make sure your numbers are correct, because those are, how many laps is it? Is it 60?
36.
36.
36.
There we go. There was a 6. There was a 6 in there somewhere. There we go. I'm getting through this answer somehow. But yeah, so I'm very impressed by Jake Hughes so far. But I think when the lights go out, we're going to see what he's really made of, and I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, it's a point you brought up, Ed. That's important for all the viewers out there. One of the differences between last season and this season of Formula E is that we're going back to the lap count instead of 45 minutes plus 1 for a time race. So going back to laps instead of time. And I also agree with Jake Hughes. I think that he has great potential to do some wonderful things this season in his debut Formula E season with the McLaren team. And in testing, Hughes was very, very impressive. Been impressive this weekend as well in Mexico. But my question is, how is he going to do in the race? And it's nice to see him get a big break. And I know I've been following his career coming up through Formula 3 and Formula 2. I always felt like he had a lot of talent, but wasn't able to get that top tier seat to be able to show what he can do. And I think he can do this with McLaren in Formula E. And I believe we also have a comment in the chat room as well from Dima saying, do we know about the new Formula E logo? Hankook is the tire supplier in Formula E that replaces Michelin. No fan booths, attack charge on pit stops. Maserati back in motorsports, and McLaren replacing Mercedes. Yes, Dimas, we've been up to date on all of that throughout the last several months, and I'm really glad you brought up the Hankook tires, because that's something we're going to be talking about right this second. And as we all know, this is the first race with the new Gen 3 Formula E car with more power. The car's been just slipping and sliding all over the place. Hankook, the new tire supplier, they're sporting the red and blue colored grooves. So, Ed, I'm going to throw this question to you. Along with energy management, will tire management be a new challenge for the drivers? And what are some of the biggest differences between the Gen 2 and the Gen 3 Formula E car?
Yeah, I love that comment by DMS, by the way. Most people in the press conference is, okay, here's one talking point. Now, here's all the talking points. Let's just put them all in one. Let's not waste any time. That's exactly the way we like to see it. So in terms of the Gen 3, let's go for the Hankook tires, of course. So Hankook, the South Korean tire manufacturer, we've seen supply back in the day tires for series like F3. I think they used to do a lot of GT and touring car series tires as well. And so they've made an all-weather tire, of course, and they put these little blue and red grooves in there. I think they're mainly just for decoration, just because they look nice. And it's also the first race they're doing as the tire supply full Formula E, replacing, of course, Michelin. And they've built a very, very hard compound of tire, which means the peak performance isn't quite as high as maybe the Michelins were necessarily, at least not until the teams figure a way to get more performance out of the tire as the season goes on, which I'm sure, being very, very smart engineers, they inevitably will. But also it means that the tire will give the same performance pretty much throughout the race. And indeed, if they get 2 sets of tires each weekend, just in case of a puncture, then it's going to be the same set of tires you'll see on the cars pretty much throughout each weekend. And it was interesting because we noticed in qualifying with the Michelins, what we saw was they would, during the group stages, Group A and B, they would often change tires in the middle. They pit and change tires, and we didn't see that here. So that means that the hard tire is giving very, very consistent performance throughout qualifying when they're pushing at 300 kilowatts or whatever it is. And I think in the race they're going to see similar lap times throughout then, which is excellent because it means we don't have to worry about fuel drop off or anything like that. In terms of differences between Gen 2 and Gen 3, which is the actual question you asked me to answer, essentially we've got more power, we've got more regenerative braking essentially at the front and rear. So you've got essentially 600 kilowatts that's being regenerated, but in terms of output, it's about 350 is the max with the attack mode activated, essentially, which functions very, very similarly to how we saw last season. But I believe there's a system, and maybe Josh can talk more about this, where there's a bit more customization in terms of the teams will pick the amount of time. So they might be able to use a lower power mode for longer, or a higher power mode for a shorter period of time, essentially. Have I got that correct, Josh?
Yeah. It's the new article 37.3.b. So you can have 350 kilowatts of power, and you can use that for only 4 minutes during the race, but you still have to have 2 attack modes. So the drivers get 3 different scenarios that they can talk with between themselves and the team as to what they want. So if you can have your first attack mode can be 1 minute. Your second attack mode will then last for 3 minutes, unless you want to go equal, whereas 1 and 2 will both be 2 minutes long. Or the third strategy, whereas your first attack mode can be for 3 minutes, and your second one can only be for 60 seconds, 1 minute. So it's basically just exactly how much you want to play with strategy in terms of, because we always see, didn't we, under the safety car, people have just gone for attack mode, and they later on in the race they lose 4 minutes of activation of the attack mode. Now they will get to choose that, where is they want to move up the grid for early in the race. Say you are Max Gunther in the Maserati and you're starting 17th. You might want to take an early attack mode, take that for 3 minutes, get up the grid, and then later on in the race you might need to defend quickly, so you just take a 1 minute situation. So there's a lot of more strategy to play with as well. Kobe, you mentioned we've gone to laps. Yes, it's 36 laps for this distance of the race, but we're still having the added time and the additional laps added on. So basically, anytime we're under a full course yellow or a safety car, if we go over 3 minutes and 29 seconds behind that caution, there will be no added laps added. If we go 3 minutes 30 to 6 minutes 59, we'll have 1 additional lap. And if it's anywhere between 7 minutes and 10 minutes 29, we will have 2 added laps. No more than that will be added to the time. And this will not happen if 80% of the race is already passed, which is after 28 laps. And we now know that we get to use maximum 300 kilowatts of power, but in terms of how much is actually stored in the battery, that's changed as well. Now it's 41 kilowatts of energy stored in the battery, and the drivers still have to regen 30% of that during the race. And at select races this season, we'll have an attack charge where they'll come into the pit lane, they'll stop for 30 seconds. Basically, a very long extender will be plugged into the back of the car, give it 4 kilowatts more of power, and then they can use that in their next attack mode activation for a bit more power. So there's a few more rules to look out for, but that's not going to be for today. Drivers have got 41 kilowatts of power across 36 laps and 2 activations of attack mode. That can either be 1 to 3 minutes, 2 to 2, or 3 to 1.
Thank you for all those technical details, Josh. I know we're all going to be learning as we go along during this 2023 Formula E season and getting back to the action on the track. Avalanche and Andretti almost had a front row lockout today. DS Penske and Porsche both had the fastest time in a practice session, but neither made it to the top 8 in qualifying. And Josh, learning back to you again, do you see Penske, Porsche, and Maserati making a march toward the front today?
Well, I was surprised at Maserati being 16th and 17th. I know Gunther has sort of been nowhere all weekend long. We've barely talked about him. Mortara did touch the wall in practice too this morning, and that upset the entire balance as well. He wasn't able to run a 350-watt lap time, so went into qualifying very much blind. But Maserati have shocked me of how slow they were, considering we left Valencia saying, oh, they're going to be very big championship contenders this year alongside DS Penske, who they share a powertrain with. McLaren are good. Porsche, I think, had a bit of a flash in the pan. I liked what they looked like with Verlaine, but he got blocked in the session. So I think out of the Penske, Porsche, Maserati, watch out for Penske to be the biggest one today as a surprise as they join their new DS manufacturers as well. Now that Dragon left them at the end of last season.
Yeah, I don't think it was too bad for Verlaine because he make it to the duels into sixth. I think he was a bit unlucky. He had to face Dennis. I think Dan Ticktum said something quite similar. Like he was unlucky he had to face Jake Hughes, who I think was the fastest in his group, essentially. So there's a little bit of luck of the draw in terms of how the top 8 sort of worked out. And the guys like Verne and DaCosta just missed out on making it into the duels. So I don't think it was a total disaster for either of them, particularly in the case of the DS Penske cars. We know they were being, Jay Penske mentioned on the coverage, they're both being essentially sort of held up on their laps. So it'll be interesting to see if the race goes any better, if they've got the sort of energy management and the efficiency to really make their way through the pack. But yeah, certainly you've got to say Andretti having a really good qualifying shows the potential of that Porsche powertrain. And we'll have to see if the factory team can emulate that a bit later on. And I agree, Josh, the Maserati were a little bit anonymous and disappointing. It was a bit of an odd one for them. And we'll have to see if that's a trend for these DS-powered cars of sort of not being able to qualify well and then maybe having to do all the hard work in the race, or if there's maybe more of a more serious issue that we didn't know about. Of course, there is a new team principal at Maserati in the form of James Rossiter, who's taken over from Jerome D'Ambrosio. And of course, he's got a lot of experience as a driver as well. He was one of the first people to actually test the DS powertrain in preseason testing for Penske, actually. So it'll be interesting to see the rest of that old Monaco Sports Group / Venturi squad sort of kind of, they've got Gunther and Roster, the two new members plugged in, and they're taking a little bit of time to get on top of things. But I definitely think the race could definitely go a lot better for the DS cars, and I wouldn't discount them at all.
Yeah, the questions we've got from Mark Prieston as well coming up is going to be absolutely fantastic, isn't it, Ed? I can't wait for that commentary coming up as well, because we've got the mind of a team principal and a technical director all rolled into one coming on the broadcast.
Don't forget your useful co-commentator. I'm always around.
Yes, yeah.
I may not have experience as a Formula E team principal, but you know.
How do I get rid of him? Do I just push him off like that? Is
okay,
I'll
just duck down.
No, but honestly, I'm very much looking forward to Mark being in the box. It's all down to Ed as well, getting him in the box as well. So a team principal's mind is going to be fantastic. And he's won 2 Constructors' Championships, 3 Drivers' Championships in his time there. He knows exactly how to pinpoint a race. So I'm looking forward to him being in the commentary box. And of course, he's still team principal because Techeetah are coming back in 2024. So it's even better. We just got him as a stopgap. It's brilliant.
It's going to be very exciting to see Techeetah back. And of course, that's going to be very exciting today to see you all in the commentary box with him. Now, this year, something very different. Grid ranking, they did a preseason poll. And when it came to Formula E, Mitch Evans came out on top. Antonio Felix da Stoffel Vandoorne round out your top 3. Of course, all of them were voted in it. But the big thing, of course, Mitch Evans, this weekend hasn't exactly started off that great for him. I can see he is starting 10th in this race. And then his teammate, Sam Bird, way in the back. Unfortunately, just did not had a good qualifying session with Jaguar. And here's the big thing. Along with his horrible start last year, wasn't that great. No podiums. Best finish, 4th in the opening round in Diriyah. His last win was in New York City in season 7 with Jaguar. So I have to ask you guys, when it comes to Sam Bird and Jaguar, is this a make or break season for him to keep that seat with Jaguar?
Well, I guess I'll go first because I'm on the sheet going first. But yeah, Jaguar obviously is a big manufacturer, and of course, when Bird was signed ahead of season 7, he was obviously a big signing for them. And of course, I think maybe there's a little bit too much stock put into the stat of, oh, Sam Bird won a race in every season, or at least one race in every season, because in season 8, he didn't win in 8 of the races. Like you say, best of 4th in the Diriyah near the season opener. And it was just a case of things just didn't quite come together for him. Certainly, Mitch Evans had a great season last year, and I think that maybe put Sam Bird somewhat in the shade. Of course, Mitch Evans has been at that team since inception, and Sam has sort of joined, like I say, in season 7. So he's not quite had the same amount of time to sort of integrate himself with those engineers and get. He certainly had a lot of time now, of course, since season 7, but I think. I don't think we can be too hasty and say based on one qualifying session that Sam Bird's drive is under threat, because of course he's still recovering from that injury at London where he broke his fingers and had to miss the last 2 races in Seoul, in South Korea. So I think I certainly think Bird personally will be under a little bit of pressure to perform, but I don't think he'll be. If Mexico doesn't go well, I don't think it's going to be a case of, oh, well, it's going to be Sam Bird's this season, we can write it off completely. I think he's come back before, and I think he may well surprise us and do so again, because that's always seems to be the way in Formula E, that you sort of do the first couple of races, you see drive, oh, this guy's near the back, he's not going to do much this season. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, he pops in a great lap. Another great example, Sasha Fenestraz, rookie we've seen today. At a Nissan, of course, with one race of experience in Formula E, filling in at the last minute for Antonio Giovinazzi in South Korea. And out of nowhere was able to get into the duels. Admittedly, didn't win in the duels, so he starts 8th for Nissan, I think. But certainly a very big surprise there. And I think Fenestraz, as he grows in confidence, as the Nissan gets quicker and hopefully catches up to the pace of the customer McLaren team, I think Nissan could very well be one to watch, and Fenestraz, I think, will be leading that charge. So if Fenestraz can do it, then certainly I wouldn't put it beyond Sam Bird with the Envision of Buemi going quite well today. I wouldn't count Bird out yet at all.
Yeah, because Evans starts 10th, Bird starts 21st as well. It's a disappointing
20th, it's not that bad, Josh.
Oh, is he? Oh, my time is green, it's 21st.
Okay, maybe the grid network one was wrong. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think actually the grid's changed. That's why our one's different. The grid has actually changed. It's put Bird down in 21st position and Nato is up to 20th as well. So I wonder which one has changed positions while we've been on air. But
I think NATO might have had his time disallowed. That might be where the confusion is.
And that's why he's gone down the order. Yeah. So see, look, live things happening as well. This is what happens when we put it on right in between, because usually there's a day between them, but Formula E is a 1-day event usually. So qualifying the races on the same day. So yeah, Bird's 21st on this timing screen as well up here. But yeah, I think he's going to have a very difficult race ahead of him. I think he's a prime candidate to take a 3-minute attack mode and then a 1 minute later on for his second activation as well. Safety cars are big here. And you guys know, Mexico City turn 1, it's literally like putting a knife out and people just dancing around the edge of it without slicing something. It's a very difficult corner to get right. We always see accidents there. And the one thing I'm worried about is the fact is that the brakes this year, because of the regen, have changed. So the front and rear brakes regenerating the energy, the same thing, and energy now coming mainly from the front with the regen. Everyone's been saying it's braking in this car is like nothing you've ever experienced. It's a completely new braking experience. Of it as well. We've seen them failing a lot. We've seen them locking up. They've actually removed the wall that De Vries hit a couple of years ago when he had a brake failure. They've removed that because in case everyone goes full speed down towards turn 1 and can't brake, they need to go on as long as possible. So actually the wall, I found out for turn 1, is actually where Formula 1's turn 1 is. It's right down. And that's 800 odd meters from pole position down towards turn number 1. So it's a very, very long way for these cars to stop from 200 miles an hour. So it's very interesting as well. Bird, he's had these problems with the brakes in practice. 2, he struggled and he didn't do a full lap time, so went into qualifying blind. I think I think 14th is probably the best he could do today for Sam. And in terms of a make or break year, I'll go opposite to Ed. I think it is very much a make or break year, not in terms of the fact if anybody would give him a seat, whether or not Sam Bird says, do you know what, I've had enough, I'll stick to sports cars.
That's a bit brutal. Okay.
Well, to be fair, that's where he's racing, wasn't he? In the Le Mans, in the World Endurance Championship cars, I think I would probably go there if he can't get it in Formula E, because it's 9 seasons now, came close to a championship twice, hasn't done it, and I'd be getting pretty fed up if I was Sam Bird as well. So, yeah, it's a disappointment. And he lost that record just like Hamilton lost his as well.
Yeah, Sam Bird is going to be really interesting. I mentioned sports car, a lot of experience there, so I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see what happened with Sam Bird. Of course, a lot of folks are going to be watching as well too this year, making the change. Stoffel Vandoorne was with Mercedes; they're now McLaren. So overall, I think there's going to be several drivers everyone's going to be watching, and I know we've been talking a lot about this race weekend, the changes, the new teams, new car, the new tire. Very exciting overall. And a couple of comments in the chat room before we go to the next question. Do you know Jaguar's livery? It's black and white. We no longer have the Futurix teal blue color. So overall,
it's a bit like this, isn't it?
Showing it with the Lego.
It's confusing me.
Oh, yeah. I'll stop it now. It's a bit of a Doppler effect going on there.
Which car last year was black and white? Sorry. Which car last year was black and white?
Don't ask me about last year.
Can't remember what it was, but it's confusing me. Every time I see the Jaguar come out the last corner, I don't think it's a Jaguar. So my brain isn't twigging yet. It's like learn the cars day. This is one thing about being a commentator on a series that runs on one day. You literally have an hour of practice to learn the cars, and then you're thrown into a live quali, and it always makes mistakes. So apologies if I make a couple of errors today in the race commentary. Ed's
and apologies, Joe. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No worries. I was just going to say, when it comes to the black and white car, I think it was a couple of years ago, we saw the Dragons that had that reverse scheme where one had a black and
black,
and then the other one had the reverse. That was confusing. And then just yesterday in the first practice, Formula E, we saw the commentators getting some of the drivers confused because it's a brand new car, new look for everybody. I mean, really, the DS Penske's look similar to last year, but it's a different team. It's not DS Toshida. So a lot of changes. And overall, as I mentioned, with all these changes, we still have some of the favorites. As I mentioned, Stoffel Vandoorne, the defending champion. Antonio Felix Acosta, he's still in there. Lucas di Grassi, started on the pole. And Pascal Wehrlein, which of course almost won this race, was that last corner pass, zero energy, right at the finish line. Lucas di Grassi got another win. When it comes to today's race, starting with you, Joshua, who or what will you be keeping your eye on today?
I'm going to be keeping my eye on two things. One, Jake Hughes. I think I'm going to stand by my fact that he's got something very good as a rookie coming through. I think he's going to be a top dollar bill. Second, brakes. I think the brakes are going to be the key thing as well. Everybody is scared about whether or not these brakes will make it through an entire race. They did the simulation, but it hasn't been as hard as it would be now in proper race conditions. We're at altitude as well. That plays a factor in. So braking is going to be on mine because now they're going to regen the energy and that could shut the entire car down at any second. So I think, Ed, you said it, didn't you? Or was it Nick in the commentary? It's not ideal that these cars could effectively break down and ground to a halt immediately in the middle of a straight with cars behind them. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a red flag today at some point, to be fair.
And I'm going to be looking at two drivers who, well, actually one driver is making his Formula E debut, who I've already talked about, and another driver who was very impressive in qualifying. First one, obviously, Jake Hughes. I expect to see some great things from him this season, and I believe that he could really surprise a lot of people in this race. Another one is Sasha Fenestras. Been keeping up with Sasha Fenestras's career when he was racing full-time over in Japan in the Super Formula Series. Saw a lot of great things for him, and a lot of people think that Fenestras has the potential to potentially be a Formula One driver someday. A lot of people very high on him. Very interested to see how he gets along in the Formula E World Championship this year.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what to say. It's good that I go last, isn't it? I certainly think I actually think the track temperature is going to be quite interesting in terms of these hand-cooked tires. We saw in free practice 2, I think it was earlier in the morning, a lot of drivers were weaving to try and keep the temperature up in the Hancocks. So it's clear that a lot of teams are still figuring out how to get the best out of them. There are a lot of teams that didn't get quite so much running in the free practice session that's hurt them in qualifying. They'll be hoping to move forward a bit in the race. I certainly think of those who qualified well, I think Jake Dennis is certainly going to be the one that I'll be watching, second on the grid on the front row, nearly got that pole position. I think of all my picks, I think in terms of driver's title, I went on the Formula E Zone show a week or two ago. I basically went for Jake Dennis to win the Drivers' Championship, and everyone was like, wow, that's a really out-of-the-box pick, because everyone else was thinking, oh, it's going to be a DS or a Maserati driver, or it's going to be one of the Jaguar drivers like Mitch Evans or something like that. And I was like, nope, it's going to be Jake Dennis, because, of course, I remembered him narrowly missing out on the title in Season 7 in that crazy decider in Berlin. And I really think he's really shown in the qualifying session that he might have been a good one to watch out for. So I think I'll watch him. Other person I might be watching out for, Dan Ticktum, who qualified the Neo 333 up in 5th. Very good qualifying, career best qualifying for him. And I think Neo 333 will be desperate to get some big points on the board. They've not gotten better than a top 6 in a long, long while. I have to go back to season 2 or maybe even the first season for last. I don't know, season 4 when they finished second in Mexico with Oliver Turvey, of course. I think that was the last time they've gotten a sort of podium finish result. So Dan Ticktum will certainly be looking to bring it home, get a career best finish in Formula E, and continue to impress people out there, because that's a car that not many people I think were expecting to see make it into the duels 2 races in a row.
I think I'm going to be one driver I'll be watching, Sebastian Buemi, brand new team with Envision. It's going to be really interesting to see how that team goes. I feel that could be something where it could, bring new motivation, new life into Sebastian Buemi, try to get back into victory lane, or it could have the opposite effect. If he struggles, maybe then people will be wondering how much longer will Buemi stay in Formula E. The 2 and Ready Avalanches, I think those are 2 cars to watch. Be really interesting to see, because if they have a good race weekend, people are going to be talking about the F1 and Ready debacle and at Ready Global Sport having a great presence in Formula E and other motorsports. That's going to come up. So those are a couple of the things I'm going to be watching. In the chat room, one question. I'll throw this to Joshua first. Will we see a safety car off the initial start after people wreck due to the smoke? I think this might be in regards to starting. We've seen as the cars are practicing their launches, a lot of smoke.
Yeah, a lot more smoke than usual, isn't it? Back in the Michelin days as well, they usually was a little bit on the practice starts. The Hancocks seem to be, as Ed said earlier, harder and difficult to get them into temperature. So I'm hoping what they were practicing when we saw the smoke this morning in practice was that they're practicing when they go from the dummy grid to the main grid. Because what happens is we line up 4 grid slots back, then we roll forward. So I'm hoping that initial spin up is just to try and get heat into the rear tires as well. And the actual launch getaway is hopefully going to be quite smooth as it is per normal. Not much has changed in terms of the launch procedure across generations. We never saw a big change from Gen 1 to Gen 2. In terms of just the acceleration. So in terms of the initial getaway, it's still foot to the floor away. There's no clutch. So it should be quite simple. But I reckon we could still see a safety car at the start due to turn 1, because braking's difficult and you're going on a knife edge into the first corner. Someone's going to go off. And that's why I think we're actually going to see maybe a red flag immediately at the start of the race. The more and more I'm thinking about it, the more and more I'm thinking this start could actually be very, very dramatic. So let's hope they're all behaving themselves, because we've got 36 laps ahead of us and we want to get through all 36 with all 22 cars.
I actually disagree with you, Josh, about being a safety car or red flag in the beginning. I think there might be a bit more careful. I certainly think there's going to be 1 or 2 incidents in the race, because there always are in Formula E. But I feel like we didn't talk about it too much with Jake Dennis. There was a bit where he hit a bollard in qualifying and lost part of his front wing, and it was clearly affecting the handling of the car. He was still able to make it into the final, which was impressive, but ended up losing to Di Grassi, and he sort of blamed it on that, essentially, that he's kept having to go out, and they didn't give him a chance to change the front wing, essentially, because I guess there's a sort of, not just for time, but also a sort of Parc Fermé thing where you're not allowed to repair the car in between, unless there's like a big safety issue. And I guess the stewards deemed it was a little dangerous, but not unsafe enough, because they'd sort of been lax, because there was a thing in the very first key seasons of Formula E where drivers are complaining about, looked like it was going to fall off, but it didn't, and they still sent me in to replace the front wing. I was like, hey, it ruined my race and whatever. And then Gen 2, it was the opposite, where pit drivers just allowed to keep going with bits of the car missing, and just like we get these wounded warriors crawling over the line. And now it seems damage is a much more bigger impact on your performance. So I feel like the drivers are going to be a bit more careful. Whether that's going to avoid incidents or potentially lead to more, I don't know. But the first lap in Mexico certainly is always a bit crazy. It's interesting, the smoke. I actually thought the first thing you said was the flares that sometimes get set off by the fans. But I guess ever since Zandvoort last season in Formula One, where we had the big controversy with that, where sessions had to basically be delayed while they picked up these smoke flares and tried to get rid of the orange smoke from the Dutch crowds, and not just the Verstappen fans, but I guess it's more of a sort of global.
One of them was
well.
one of them that was thrown onto the track, the one at the pit lane end of Q3, was done by a security guard, and he looked pretty pleased by himself as well. I was like, well, you've just been sacked.
Well, I think the security in Mexico is a little bit better in terms of like the marshals aren't just throwing smoke grenades onto the track in the middle of the race.
They're definitely better than the ones in Budapest, Hungary, where if you say even though you're media, you're still going to punch in the face as well.
I guess there's no Mexican driver for the locals to be too to make too many kind of crazy decisions towards in terms of declaring their love. But I think I'm a little bit optimistic that we'll get a cleaner, if not a totally clean race. But I certainly think there's going to be 1 or 2 drivers that come to grief, because in a second race where it's very easy to overtake because it's quite wide into some of these braking zones, I certainly think we might get a couple of people not seeing each other in time and turning in, and a little bit of side-on-side contact at the very least. But I'm excited. It's going to be impossible to see which way it kind of goes. But I have a feeling we're about to be asked to predict who's going to win the race. So I guess we'll have to predict, even though I just said it was impossible.
One of the big things, as you brought up, especially as the cars are slipping and sliding, I can almost just see if you have 2 cars going side by side in that final corner coming toward the straight, there's going to be potentially contact. They're sleeping on the sliding. That inside car could slide. I think this has a potential for a phenomenal race, a safe race. That's what everyone wants. And of course, big thank you to Alex in the chat room for sharing that question. And this is a time for everyone in the chat room. Start typing in with who do you think is going to win the race, because it's time for Pick a Winner, the first one of 2023. And could we see for the first time Kobe Lambeth, who is undefeated, not win this? This is your best opportunity to get ahead of Kobe, because the leaderboard, it's blank. Nobody's there. So definitely encourage everyone, pick a winner. Start commenting in the chat room. If you don't catch us live, put it in the comments. Who do you think is going to win the Mexico City E-Prix, the opening race for the Formula E season, and of course the first race that's be scored under the grid ranking? Going to start with the defending champion, Kobe. Who do you think is going to win the Mexico City E-Prix?
I know a lot of people are probably going to pick Lucas di Grassi, but I'm going to go with the dark horse that I've been talking about a lot on today's show. I think it's going to be McLaren winning on debut in Formula E. Jake Hughes is going to get the job done.
Jake Hughes.
I can't get ahead of him then.
I was going to say, Joshua, who do you see getting the win?
Jake Hughes. I said it earlier. I can't get ahead of him now. I was hoping maybe I could lead, but no.
You could go for a different choice, Josh. You know.
Yeah, but he's not going to. Nobody else. I don't think de Grassi's going to win. I don't think Dennis is going to win. I don't think Lotterer is going to win. Ticton certainly won't, because Ticton will probably storm the grid, then blame somebody else for running.
You have little faith.
Yeah, it's Hughes. I'm going Hughes. I'll just have to match Kobe for a week and then try my luck next time out. Where's the next one? Monaco Rally, isn't it? Should be something.
Yeah, and Rolex 24 as well.
Oh, that too. Forgot about that.
Right, I guess this is the part where I pick who I think is going to win. I'm probably not going to go for the acts for Robin Fryans.
Don't go for Lotterer.
No.
Don't go for Lotterer. Wasted vote.
Well, there has to be a first time for everything with Lotterer, I guess. At some point, he's going to win, I feel. But I think I'm going to go with Jake Dennis. Jake Dennis was my pick to win the championship. When I was asked for the Formula E Zone show, I picked Mortara, and Mortara is qualified, I think, just behind Maxi Gunfer on the grid, down in like 17th, if I remember correctly. So 17th or 18th. So I think that was probably the wrong pick. So I'm going to change it to my the guy who I think is going to be the world champion at the end of the season, which is Jake Dennis for Avalanche Andretti, who starts on the front row alongside Degrassi. I feel like he'll get the jump and he won't be headed. Oh.
I'm going to go with somebody different just so make sure.
It's not someone called Jake.
Right. I don't have a tie with anybody. I was going to go with Jake Hughes. That's taken. Then you went with Jake Dennis. So both Jakes are gone. I'm going with the pole sitter. He's won here before. Lucas Degrassi. Mahindra knows how to win. New car. I think this is the best opportunity for them to get the win. And in the chat room, we have a couple comments. Adam, a good friend, says Lucas Degrassi is his pick. Ben Schneider going with Degrassi. So overall, we got several folks coming for the title this year. Finished best of the rest for a second year in a row. By changing for Evans to Jake Dennis. Now, of course, Alex Hughes, not part of the grid staff. He was the highest non-grid staff person in pick a winner. Got a podium, third place. So congratulations to Alex. But he's going with Jake Dennis for this race. Overall, I think it's going to be a very exciting race. And we thank everyone for tuning in to Grid Live Pre-Race, first one of 2023. And if this is your first time watching us, consider investing in us through Patreon. Call the show, Mark and Robin, invest in us. If we could get about $500 a month, we could start sending folks to the track on a regular basis. And of course, you got the option of buying me a coffee. That's where you could put as much as you want in a one-time investment, or buy coffee for a particular person that's on the air. They'll thank you when they're on the air for buying them a cup of coffee. And check out our social media outlets. We're all over the place. You can start with gridranking.com, and from there find all the information and past history of the grid ranking, what's coming up, our past coverage at the track as well. And this year, Joshua, I know it's pretty exciting because Formula E, we're going to start counting down. There's 12th round scheduled to be at Portland. Of course, that's home of the Grid Network. So definitely we encourage everyone, if you want to ensure we could get folks to the races, click on that Patreon link. It takes no more than 5 minutes. You get a thank you card written by me as well. Any final thoughts before we go into this race? Joshua, I know you got a very exciting broadcast going on. We'll start with you on any final thoughts.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting race. I think it's going to be one of the best Formula E races we've seen in a long time. A whole new generation, complete unknown, and very much chaos predicted. And to have the thoughts of Mark Preston as well in the commentary box, a team principal of 100 races across Amlin and Cheetah, who's still team principal, just taking a year off because the team lost the funding and the main sponsorship. To have him in the commentary box giving us his exclusive thoughts about how everything runs and what he would do in this situation, it's going to be fantastic. And I didn't think that's how we'll be starting off 2023 in the commentary box. I've got Nick Homewood and Ed Hunter alongside me in the commentary box as well. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Game on for 2023.
Game on, as you said, Edward Hunter. I know you're going to be in the commentary box with him. And of course, Formula E Zone for new fans that are watching the first time. What are some of the big things coming up for Formula E Zone?
Yeah, well, I know Jack Pickering is going to go to a couple more races this season, including, of course, London for the season finale. We got Mark Preston on the show with Josh, obviously covering the race, but on Tuesday I've got an actual proper interview lined up with him, which I was originally going to do on Thursday, but other things popped up for Mark, so we had to reschedule it. But I'm looking forward to that in a more relaxed, non-race environment, as well as non-Josh. Not because I dislike commentating with Josh, but because it's just nice to have a one-on-one where you don't get distracted by Josh shouting. I shout as well.
I'll be talking over everybody.
We divide the shouting evenly. Mark even may get excited. Who knows? Well, fingers crossed.
He could just sit there.
Yeah. I do think we went in with a lot of safety issues regarding Jaguar, and it seems Jaguar have made adjustments to sort that with their powertrain, that they're not just stopping randomly on track at the moment. So I feel confident that we can have a safe, if not at all incident-free race, but certainly a race that's safe for the drivers, spectators, and teams, and the marshals and everyone else there at the circuit. So that's what I hope for, and I think it's going to be a great start to the era, and I'm really excited to see where this season ends up taking us in terms of seeing the cars get better and better, the hardware, the software improving, the teams getting on top of these tires and all different challenges put in front of them at all these races, because Formula E just keeps popping up surprises, and I'm sure there's going to be more than one or two before we're done tonight.
Plenty of surprises, I think, in Formula E, one of the more unpredictable series in the grid ranking. And of course, I think a very exciting 2023 racing season. And we encourage everyone to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you're with us throughout 2023. For Edward Hunter at Formula E Zone, Kobe Lambert from the podium finish. Be sure to watch Joshua Birch Motorsports. Great coverage throughout the race. I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races.
Thank you for watching us right here on the Grid Network. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs throughout 2023. It'll mean a lot. You click on the link and join our Patreon Invest in the Grid Network. I'll send you a thank you card.